Hello and welcome to another episode of MacStories Unwind. It's Friday. That means it's almost time for the weekend. And it also means that Federico Vitici is with me. Hey, Federico.
Hello. It is almost time for the weekend and I cannot wait.
It is. My Friday is just like a sprint towards the weekend every single week because we have pretty busy Fridays, you and I.
Yes. Remember when we were, for like that period when we were sending MacStories weekly on Saturday? That was bad.
Yeah, I don't know why.
That was not good.
No, and you think to yourself, you're like, why did we ever do that? And I think it's because being really busy on Friday also kind of sucks, but it's not as bad as like
being
writing
busy
a
on
newsletter
Friday
on Saturday
and
morning.
Saturday. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That was bad.
Exactly. Federico, I want to talk before we get to our picks a little bit about Xcode and mobile because, we've talked over the years about Apple doing Xcode on the iPad or some version of it on the iPhone. And they've never really seemed interested in that. I mean, there's never been any even hint that that's in the works other than we have Swift Playground, which, is a great app, but it is also not really the same thing as a full-blown IDE. And one of the things that I was thinking about this week is we saw Anthropic bring integration between Claude Code and both Telegram and Discord messaging. It started to dawn on me, having played around with a couple of iOS apps myself in recent months, is that we're right there with mobile development that completely cuts Xcode out of the picture. And I gotta think that that's not a good thing for Apple, that Apple doesn't want that probably.
Not.
Right? I mean, you've been able, this is like, in a way, what's new here is really these integrations because, being able to do Xcode projects from the command line in terminal is not a new thing. That's been around for a very long time. But what's changing is that these LLMs these agents are allowing people to use, whether it's Telegram messaging or something like remote control in the Claude Code iPad app, allowing developers to manage and develop their apps fully within iOS and iPad OS in a way that is a lot more flexible than we've seen in the past. Sure, you could always use a terminal emulator to do some of this stuff, but now you've got a hook into that. And, for instance, just to give you an example, last night I was in Telegram. I told Claude Code running on my desktop Mac to build, run, and deploy an iOS app.
I didn't know that you could. I knew that you could build and run. I didn't know you could deploy.
Yeah, because you can wirelessly deploy, right? There's a functionality. You don't have to do it with a wire anymore. So I was sitting on my couch, and downstairs, this app is building. It takes, a few minutes to build. It builds, it ran it, and then it wirelessly deployed it to my phone that I was actually texting Claude with.
That's
from
incredible.
Telegram. And
it's like almost end to end, basically.
Yeah, because then, so let's say you're doing that as a developer and you look at your app, you can take a screenshot because things like this Telegram integration support images. Take a screenshot, maybe you circle something, say this element in the UI is wrong, send it back. Claude churns for a while, tries to fix it, and then redeploys back to your iPhone. And you can actually, that becomes a loop where you can do it all from your iPhone, which I just find it very interesting just as from a process standpoint or a workflow standpoint. But also, I think that it really is, it's time for Apple to really lean into Xcode and figure out a way to get it both on mobile and to fully integrate these AI tools that are out there. And I mean, we've seen it come to the desktop, right? We've seen a sidebar for Codex and Claude Code, but it still feels a little tacked on. I think all this needs to be carefully thought through and actually, expanded a lot more than it is currently.
Yeah. And instead, what they're doing is they're blocking these vibe coding apps from releasing updates on the App Store. This has been a story this week. And I mean, it's like, I understand that these apps are, potentially breaking some App Store review guidelines.
Yeah.
And I also feel like Apple is in a position here that they have everything to lose, right? With the App Store, especially if not coding, but like the idea of making an app, making a digital piece of software is changing. I would like to see Apple make a big statement and embracing this change instead of acting as the guardians of the old way of doing things and blocking these new tools. And people are just going to figure out different ways, like you did, for example, by talking to a bot on Telegram. And now, obviously, that's not a user-friendly average consumer thing, what you just described. But even if you think to 6 months ago, that would have been impossible or hard to believe for people like us. Yeah. And so when you see that kind of momentum, it always starts with the power users. It always starts with the early adopters. That's literally how any technological revolution has started and evolved, and eventually got simplified and made more approachable to reach the masses. But that's like that stage, that early stage, when early adopters, when the nerds are saying, "Oh, this is incredible," that's when you gotta get in, right?
Yep.
Otherwise,
and it's when you should start listening, especially Apple as a company.
Yes, and we've seen this happen with many companies over the years, like Facebook missing mobile and then having to spend $1 billion to purchase Instagram. Like how many companies ignored something that was happening in a niche, but that clearly was telling you this is the future, and so many companies missed that and eventually later either disappeared or had to spend a lot of money to catch up. And so I feel like this is probably another of those stories.
I think you're probably right. I think it's going to be very interesting to track what's going on with these apps that are appearing in the App Store to build apps for iOS. I suspect that the rule that is really giving Apple the most heartburn is the fact that you're able to execute this code within another app on the iPhone, because that's always been kind of like a pretty bright red line, I think, for a lot of years with Apple. But I think, there's some, there's some legitimate arguments there. However, I think instead of block and figure it out later, they should have been ahead of this from the get-go and coming up with a plan for how are we going to make, how we're not going to be able to hold this tide back. How are we going to shape it in a way that is both safe for consumers, but also allows these kinds of things to flourish? Because as you said, things like Telegram and all these other ways that you can get in and work with, your Mac and the terminal and all that via your iPhone or iPad, that's not going away. That's only going to get bigger.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the nerdy conversation just before the weekend.
Yeah, it's always good.
I don't have a pick per se this week.
Okay.
It's more of a hardware pick, maybe.
All right.
So I received this lovely little white pouch.
I'm so glad that you finally got this.
Hold on. I gotta say, lovely texture on this pouch. It feels so nice. I don't know what material they used. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Let me show you the front of the front of the pouch has a logo. I'm showing it off on camera. Not sure if the camera is picking it up. But what's inside the pouch, you may be wondering. It's finally an MCON controller in white that I received after 6 months of waiting.
I've had mine since around Christmas, I think, or New Year's.
I think Brandon spoke about it in like September, October.
Yeah.
And there was this is funny because so this has become sort of a meme on MPC, the podcast that we do with Brandon, that I was never getting my MCON. And I knew that there had been a problem with the Kickstarter campaign, with the international orders and the white collar, which I wanted. And so funny that a few days ago, I actually set Claude on the case for me to read my email and figure out what was going on. And I sent a pretty stern message to OSNAP support to basically ask, like, what's going on with my order? And now 2 days later, this shows up in the mail. I didn't even get a shipping notification, nothing. It just
turned up, huh?
Just turned up. So this is a lovely slide-out controller that allows you, and I'm going to show this off on camera, you can attach, in this case, I'm going to attach my iPhone Air. And boy, do I open it up with the iPhone attached? Is it gonna fly off?
No, it won't.
I guess.
It's
Are you
scary,
sure?
but
We're
I'm
recording
sure.
this. Okay,
I've done it.
John
I've done
told
it.
me. Okay. Woo. Okay, that was scary. But yeah, it worked. And
See, I was a little concerned there. I would owe you an iPhone all of a sudden.
so this is quite lovely, and then it's so satisfying to just do this. I mean, the sound alone is incredible.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put this through its paces this weekend. I'm gonna try and stream some Crimson Desert from my gaming PC, I guess.
All right.
And I will report back. But so far, like, first impressions of the hardware are super solid. Like, this thing feels great, and it's so compact and portable. It doesn't feel cheap at all. I love the feeling of the buttons. I love the feeling of the recessed sticks.
It
was
pairs
worth the
super
wait.
fast too. The
Oh,
pairing,
nice.
I think, is a really like low key, amazing feature because so many things that are accessories, you have to fiddle around with the settings on your phone or whatever. Once you get this thing set up once, it repairs very, very easily. I would say my only knock against it is maybe that it's a little slow to charge. I'm not sure what wattage it's using, but it's maybe.
You were right.
Slow.
It's already paired. Done.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you turn on that power button, it almost immediately pairs with your phone.
So I'm
You
gonna
will
close
you will
it,
not have problems with that at all.
turn off the power button, attach my phone. This is gonna be scary every single time I do it.
Yeah, it is a little. And you can, what people may not know, you can actually take that sliding portion out of the controller part. You can detach the two pieces, pull out a little kickstand, and play
Wait,
it
what?
tabletop. Yeah,
What?
I mean, there's a
This part.
there's a release latch there that you can press in order to pull the top part out, and then you yank out this little kickstand, which is the piece that holds it to the controller.
Where is it? Where's the?
I don't
back?
have mine in front
Like
of me.
on the back.
No, the button I think is on the top. I can't see you, Federico. Your video froze, so I can't help
okay.
you. I can't help you on camera because I can't see what you're holding. But
It's all right.
That's how it works.
Okay, I'll figure it out.
That one, figure it out before you actually mess around with it too much, because that's where I really felt like I was concerned I was going to break it, because I was concerned that the metal piece that holds the two together might bend or something.
Got it.
But it works, and it's totally fine. I'm pretty happy with mine. I haven't played with a ton of games with it, but I did just download Ball Pit, which has been on iOS for about a week. And I thought I would try to play Ball Pit on there, assuming that it has controller support. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I would think it would. It's the kind of game that it's made for a controller. I would not really want to play with touch for that game.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Well, I'm glad you got it finally. That was becoming a running joke that, I mean, the thing with Brendan is he actually got like a pre-production version and had that for a month or two. And then the Kickstarter ones came out, and I got mine pretty quickly. I got one of the clear ones. And then it's just nothing for months. So, all right. Well,
all right.
Glad you got it. So I do have a pick, Federico. My pick is a show on NBC Peacock called The Rise and Fall of Reggie Dinkins. And Reggie Dinkins is played by Tracy Morgan. This is a show that was created by Robert Carlock and Sam Means with Tina Fey. So this has got a lot of DNA in common with 30 Rock. And it has a style that is reminiscent of The Office and maybe Parks and Rec, because it's done as kind of that mockumentary style, camera following the characters as they go throughout their day. And Reggie Dinkins, though, is very different than those shows in the sense that Reggie Dinkins is a disgraced football star. Tracy Morgan, at some point in his football career as Reggie Dinkins, had called into like ESPN for an interview, thinking that he was calling his bookie and he was betting on his own football games, and was disgraced and kind of drummed out of football. And this whole show is about him trying to make a comeback, and that's why it's called The Fall and Rise of Reggie Dinkins. He's trying to make a comeback to redeem himself with his family, with his friends, with the public, with the sport, everyone. And to do that, he is being followed around by a documentary crew that he wants to make a very flattering documentary about him. And the the documentarian here is none other than Daniel Radcliffe, who obviously played in his younger days Harry Potter. And Daniel Radcliffe is a failed filmmaker who, was hired by Reggie Dinkins because it's like the only job he could get. And he's not very good at his job. He's very high strung, but it just makes for a really great ensemble cast comedy with, Tracy Morgan, Daniel Radcliffe, and a bunch of supporting characters, his buddies, his friends, his family, his kids, his ex-wife, who's also his business manager, despite their divorce. And it's a 10-episode series. They're 5 episodes in. I've watched 4 of those, and I found it super funny. I mean, you can watch it, as I said, on Peacock, but it's also available as a season pass, which is what I did on Apple TV, just because we don't get Peacock, and there's not that much on Peacock, frankly, that I want to watch. So $20 was the way. $20 for a season pass was the way to go.
Nice. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's if you're looking for a funny comedy that's, the episodes are like 20 to 25 minutes long, this is kind of, I think, in your wheelhouse, Federico, for that kind of thing.
Okay. All right.
All right. So to close out, Federico, we also have an Unwind Deal. I want to recommend to everyone Dust Bunny, which is a very recent movie that came out that's just $10 now on Apple TV. This is about a little girl who befriends a neighbor who also happens to be a hitman. And when things go wrong and she's got, what she considers monsters in her life, he goes out and he kills those people. And it's a very weird, quirky movie, but it was really well reviewed and it got really high ratings on various, like Metacritic and all that stuff. So maybe check it out. It'd be a good weekend movie, I think. I'll have a link in the show notes to that.
Nice. Okay.
All right. Well, that's it, Federico. Enjoy your weekend and enjoy everyone listening today. Enjoy your weekend too. And of course, you can find us over at MacStories.net, and we're on social media. Just find Federico at where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.